Thank you all for joining me here. I want to focus on why I took the action yesterday that I did, which is I believe that the fiscal integrity of Minnesota state government has been put very much at risk by the excessive tax breaks that the Republican majorities in the Minnesota House and Senate gave to people who really have the political clout but don't have the need for that kind of assistance. Tobacco tax breaks, clearly politically motivated. Premium cigar to give money for that purpose is just inexplicable and indefensible. Similarly, the estate tax, which would give tax breaks to about 1,000 of the wealthiest people in Minnesota, and do nothing for regular Minnesotans, nothing for working Minnesotans, and nothing except jeopardize their government's financial security in the future. The commercial industrial property tax levy exclusion for small businesses is something I support, but freezing that rate will have an effect of costing the state treasury over $1 billion over the next 10 years. And this is what happened in 2000, 2001. You know, we were in a surplus situation, and the tax breaks were handed out then, and the state was put on the knife's edge. And when the national economy turned down, they were we were pushed over the brink. And I came in and inherited $6 billion projected budget deficit for the coming biennium. We worked very, very hard since then to restore fiscal integrity in Minnesota. We have projected budget surpluses. We have structural balance to our state budget for the foreseeable future. We have paid back to school districts $2 billion that the state government had quote unquote borrowed from them, and any number of gimmicks and shifts and other measures that were taken to try to deal with this financial instability. And I will not willingly allow Minnesota to be put back in the kind of situation that I inherited, my successor and whoever might follow my successor. So these tax breaks in the particular are unnecessary and is highly questionable in terms of the priorities of the people who authored them and supported them, and taken in totality, they just seriously jeopardize the financial security of the state of Minnesota in the years ahead. And there are two other measures there. The license plates for undocumented immigrants is already, and I've said this again and again to the legislature, already prohibited under existing Minnesota statute. So to put this language in the bill, I met yesterday with a number of people who, it's just very, very emotionally heartbreaking for them to be going through what the Trump administration is putting them through. These are people who have mostly been in Minnesota or been in the United States for many years, decades even, who are responsible, law-abiding citizens, who are working and helping to expand the Minnesota economy, which if we were to depend simply on Caucasian men and women in the workforce, would not be expanding enough to give us the kind of economic growth that we need over the next decade and beyond. So the immigrant population, Hispanic and others, are crucial to the kind of economy that we want to generate for all the goods and services that we want to provide our children, our grandchildren, and beyond. The teacher licensure is just something that I support in a large measure, but there are some particular provisions there that really undermine the professional requirements for anybody who's going to go into a classroom in front of Minnesota school kids. And we have an excellent teaching corps. They have high professional standards. Everybody has to meet those standards, result of which we are ranked very high in almost any national comparison with other states, and that's due in part to great kids, great parents, but also due to great teachers. So those are the 5 measures that I think are essential that the legislature correct for the benefit of the people of Minnesota, and that's why I took the action that I did. With that, Chris, I'll be glad to stop and respond to questions.
At this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press star followed by the number 1. That is star 1 on your telephone keypad. Your first question comes from the line of Bill Werner with Minnesota News Network. Your line is now open.
Good morning, Governor.
Hey, Bill.
Hi. 2-part question. One, and I know you are aware that Republicans are threatening to sue you over the defunding of the legislature operating funds. And wondering if you've had a chance to talk to Senator Gazelka, if there's any meeting planned there. The second question I have is relative to your signing of the tax cut bill. I'm curious why you chose that route as opposed to kind of leaving it out there. You still had a few days, even under the 14-day rule, or if you were under the 3-day rule, it would have become law. Anyway, why you didn't take that additional time and maybe get some leverage with Republicans to try to roll back some of those tax cuts rather than signing the tax cut bill at this point, sir?
Well, they have to come into special session to change anything in the bill that they passed and sent to me. We were getting differing, even conflicting legal opinions about what applied the regular session where some bills were passed, special session where some bills were passed, what applied. And we got another opinion fairly late last night from Deputy Attorney General who raised concerns, and we felt that to be absolutely safe, I would sign the bill within the 3 days, so that regardless of what time frame would apply to it, we would be. We would have it signed and enacted as the legislature required in their little thing they snuck into the state governments. So we took that step. So, legal particulars and back and forth, if they becomes a court matter or matters for the court to ultimately resolve, I don't want to focus on why I did it. It wasn't about, legal maneuver with the legislature. It was about the items I just mentioned that are, I believe, vitally important to the future of Minnesota. The fiscal stability is vitally important to the legacy that I want to leave to my successor and future governors and legislators and for the future of Minnesota. And to undermine our fiscal integrity the way that bill would do, the tax bill would do, is just something I just cannot accept.
I understand that, sir, but your fight with them now at this point, now that the tax bill is signed, is not over that anymore. Other measures, driver's licenses, and some of the other things that I know you feel very strongly about in the other areas. So, do you feel that you lost leverage on a tax on the?
Not at all. The intent was always that the tax bill would become law. I mean, there are a number of good provisions in there that I support. The child care tax credit for working mothers and fathers was something that I proposed initially, and I thank House Chair Davids for including that. And there are other measures, agricultural property tax relief and the like. So it was always the intention that the tax bill would become law, whether it became law with my not signing it in 3 days or whether I needed to sign it within 14 days. Again, there was this lack of clarity. So the best way to resolve all of that uncertainty was for me to actually sign it within the 3 days, which I did last night, and within the 14 days, as if that's what was applicable. One way or the other way or any way, the bill's been enacted. It's in law, which was my intent all along.
Regardless of the poison pill, you would have signed it without the poison pill?
I never got to the point of considering that. Again, it would be a difficult decision because there are many features that I really support and others that I don't. So the legislature snuck in a measure that took that option, that decision away from me.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bill.
Your next question comes from the line of Mike McKinty with the update. Your line is now open.
Hello, Governor. A couple questions here. The constitutionality of defunding the legislature, are you confident what you've done is constitutional? And two, who came up with the idea of doing it, and what was the reaction of your staff when you discussed it with them?
Well, the courts will only have to resolve, there isn't case law directly applicable to this, but the legislature funds the executive branch or doesn't fund. The legislature funds or doesn't fund the judiciary. So, the powers of the respective branches are proscribed in the Minnesota Constitution and then ensuing statute. The Constitution gives me the authority to line item appropriation measures. It doesn't qualify that I can line item veto these but not others. It's just blanket authority that I can line item veto appropriation measures. That's the basis on which I believe that I was following the law and the Constitution of Minnesota. And we'll see where it goes from there. But that was my basis for my decision. It was actually my idea, and my staff had varying reactions, and I wouldn't have done it if I didn't get to the point in this process where, as I said, there are things that would otherwise go, not only be in law, but really go unrecognized with a flurry of activity in the legislature that I think are very destructive to the future of Minnesota. The 5 items I've outlined. And part of why I'm doing this is not only hopefully to make those changes, but also to draw public attention to just how bad these features are for the cohesion of Minnesota and also for the financial future of Minnesota.
But isn't when we had a shutdown last time, the courts came back and said essential services have to be continued. Wouldn't the legislature qualify as an essential service?
Well, we don't have a shutdown, so it's a different situation. There's not going to be a shutdown on June 30th. That's why I signed all of the budget bills, even though they had matters that I strongly disagreed with, so that there won't be a shutdown on July 1st. So it's a different question. It's a different situation. When the legislature's not in session, I don't know how essential they or their staffs are. They've also got slush funds of an undetermined amount that they have stocked aside, as well as a carry-forward authority, which they won't give to the executive branch, but they bestow on themselves, so they got money they can take forward. I mean, these are sort of questions that will just have to be answered over the time. What I would like to see happen is that they will agree to come back to special session and correct these serious mistakes that they made, and I'm waiting for their response.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Mike.
From the line of Kyle Potter with Associated Press. Your line is now open.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Governor. Wondering, based upon the memos that you exchanged with the Attorney General's office late last week, were you exploring or hoping that you could line item veto certain provisions in the tax bill that you're now calling for to be removed?
All of the advice I received from my own general counsel and from the Attorney General's office was that I do not have the authority to line item veto a provision in the tax bill.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Carl.
Your next question comes from the line of Zach Kaiser with Brainerd Dispatch. Your line is now open.
Hi, Governor.
Yeah.
My question is, when you were considering this action of line item vetoing the money for the legislature, were you concerned at all that doing that would sort of cross the Rubicon in a sense, where relations with the legislature, with Senator Gazelka and Representative Dowd would never get better after that point?
Well, that's certainly a consideration, and we had established, especially with Senator Gazelka, a modicum of trust by the end of the session. The leaders in the House and Senate, from all accounts, were aware of this thing they snuck into the state government's bill and didn't tell me about. So that really shattered my sense of a basis of mutual trust to carry forward, and what I've done here probably has that effect on them as well. But my overriding consideration, again, was what's right for the people of Minnesota. What could I do under the circumstances? The legislature's session's over. Republican majorities have enacted or passed these various measures that I think are very destructive to the future of Minnesota. And much as I value good relations with legislators individually and as a body, you know, my first and foremost responsibility is to do what I believe is right for Minnesota, and that's the basis for my decision.
Okay. And I also want to talk about specifically that provision in the government finance bill you said was snuck in. The Republicans are contradicting that, and they're saying that you had ample time to see that. I'm reading from an email from Susan Klossmer here. It says the bill was made publicly available online from 6 a.m. Wednesday. It was also sent directly to your office, to your senior staff, prior to being made public. So what justification do you have to say that the Republicans stuck this in?
Well, they said themselves in their press, the leaders in their press events that, you know, well, I'd find out about it eventually or whatever else. I mean, I'm told there were, by people who were present on the House and Senate floor, the 2 in the morning, that last morning, that there were legislators gloating over the fact that they had snuck this in. I mean, that was their intent. They didn't discuss it with me, and all the communications we had, all the discussions we had about all the provisions in the bill that we went over and over with a fine-tooth comb. No disclosure was made, and we couldn't get final copies of bills. I don't know what was posted Wednesday. I don't know what Wednesday we're talking about here, but we couldn't get bills from the legislature, and maybe this is one of the reasons. They didn't want us to have a chance to really go through carefully as we would need to and know every detail about every bill. So, I mean, the leaders themselves have made it clear that they, you know, intended this to be something that they could sneak in, and, you know, they had their reasons.
Okay. And then finally, was there a reaction to the line item veto? Was that what you expected, or did that surprise you?
Well, I mean, I think it would probably surprise them. Again, my concern is what's best for the people of Minnesota. This is not about, you know, back and forth between governor and the legislature, or between the Republican majorities in the legislature, which is, I understand, is sort of the contest is of greater interest to the press so far. But again, I want to go back to the reasons that I did this, which is frankly what the Republicans want to avoid. One of the reasons they were engaged in all this, you know, back and forth, he said he didn't know, is because they don't want to talk about the 5 issues. Why don't you ask them about the 5 issues? How do they justify tax breaks for premium cigars? How do they justify raising the estate tax for a handful of multimillionaires? And these are not farmers or family-owned business owners. They already have a $5 million exclusion. So how can they justify the measures that they've taken that I've challenged them on here as being the best interest of the people of Minnesota? That's what I would ask all of you to direct your attention to.
Okay. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
Your next question comes from the line of Trey Muse with Mankato Free Press. Your line is now open.
Hello, Governor. How's it going?
I'm good, and I want to give a shout out to the University of Minnesota Mankato women's softball team, national champions, and trying to arrange a reception of the governor's up here to honor them.
Okay. Thank you. And so what happens now? Have you been in communication with Republicans over potentially getting into a special session? Have they approached you about potentially starting a lawsuit? Where are things now?
I haven't had any communication. At the end of my letter said I will wait your response, and I haven't received a response as yet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your next question comes from the line of David Hill with Thief River Falls Times. Your line's now open.
Hello, Governor. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your support of DigiKey and the provisions for it in the tax bill. It's important to Thief River Falls, northwestern Minnesota, and I think all of Minnesota. But
I couldn't agree. Sorry, but I couldn't agree with you more. And there were a number of very positive features in the tax bill. That being one of them is phenomenal what DigiKey has done to expand to Thief River Falls and that your entire region of the state. And it's a great Minnesota company, and we're very fortunate they're going to continue to grow in Minnesota.
Thank you, sir. I'd also like to ask you, and thank you for your continued support of funding for education, particularly a 2% increase in funding for pre-K funding. But I was wondering, is that an actual increase or a shift in funds? And secondly, I have some questions about the earmarked $50 million for the school readiness program. What does that look like? What will it look like?
This is not a shift. This is additional money added to the formula for kindergarten through 12th grade, according to the formula that's already established. This is additional money for an additional 2% increase. The $50 million for pre-K is called School Readiness Plus, because some legislators couldn't swallow the idea that more money would go for pre-K for their political reasons. But that money is available to be for school districts to apply to the Department of Education, and as they do now for the money that was made available previously, and use that money to fund pre-K programs at reduced or no cost for people in their district. And the number of districts that have applied is grown significantly. We could only fund with last year's, this current year's funding, less than half of the school districts that applied. And one of the reasons I asked for $175 million for this program and for the next biennium is because that's what it would cost, that's what it would take to fund the applications of all the school districts that have applied for this funding. So the school districts, the superintendents, the principals, the teachers understand how valuable this pre-K experience is for kids, especially kids from disadvantaged backgrounds who, we talk about closing the achievement gap. One of the most effective ways is to prevent it from starting or to minimize it before it becomes entrenched. And so this is very, very important to the education quality of thousands of Minnesota kids. We'll be able to expand it, although not as much as I wish.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Your next question comes from the line of Heather Carlson with Rochester Post. Your line is now open.
Good morning, Governor.
Good morning, Heather. Or good afternoon now, whatever we're at.
I guess so. I have two questions for you, different topics. The first one, I talked to a Rochester Democrat who frankly said she's disappointed to see you, defund the legislature and is sort of questioning. She shares your concerns in terms of the long-term financial health, and she's questioning why not use the tools you have, like the veto, instead of going this route.
Well, I'm sure you could find another Democrat somewhere in Rochester who also disagrees with what I did. Again, if I vetoed the entire tax bill, according to the provision of the state governments, which I needed to sign because that provides funding for most of the state agencies and takes them out away from risk of a government shutdown and all the perils of that, which I learned firsthand in 2011. So if I vetoed the tax bill, first of all, there'd be some very, very good features in there that would be knocked out, like the child care tax credit, like as it was just said in Thief River Falls, funding for the expansion of the major employer up in that region of the state, agriculture, property tax relief. There are all sorts of measures in that bill that would have also been eliminated if I vetoed the entire bill. But I didn't have that option, so I didn't have to give it much consideration. It just was taken away from me by the actions of the legislature. So this was really the only tool that I could figure was available to me to try to raise the objections that I have here for the reasons here. And I would ask anybody, questions the tactics, so look at, again, the reasons why I took this action, which is the future of financial stability of the state of Minnesota is at risk. And I'm not going to leave this office in a year and a half knowing that I haven't done everything possible to provide that financial security and preserve the integrity of the financing of the state government.
Okay, the other question I had is related to bonding. The final bonding bill did not adhere to Minnesota State's priority list, and as a result, funding for Bemidji, Rochester Community Technical College's projects were left out. Just wondering what your opinion was about the decision to not adhere to that list by lawmakers.
Well, the legislature's always exercised its prerogative to follow or not follow the priority list, Minnesota State Board as well as the University of Minnesota. I don't know the particulars of those discussions or considerations by the legislature and why one project was included or one project was not. I'm not privy to that information, but it's not unusual for those projects to be determined by the legislature with consideration of the priorities given by the two education systems, but the legislature makes its own final decisions.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Heather.
Again, to ask a question is star 1 on your telephone keypad. Your next question comes from the line of Tom Hauser with KSPP-TV. Your line is now open.
Hello, Governor. I'm not in Greater Minnesota, but I am 2 floors down from you, so that might have to qualify me. Quick question. Do you really mean to say you don't know, or you aren't certain whether or not the legislature is an essential function between sessions, even though they represent 5 million people between the 201 of them? And also, my second question is, what do you mean when you talk about a slush fund that they have? Slush funds generally are used for somewhat illicit purposes. Is that what you mean to say? The reserve funds they have are actually some kind of a slush fund for improper purposes?
Well, I was being tongue-in-cheek with the comment about certainly they're elected by the people. They're elected for the entire 2 years, so I'll stand corrected on that and correct my misimpression that I meant that seriously. But the slush fund to me is a fund that is disguised and nobody knows how much is in there and nobody knows what purpose it's used for. And I've been critical publicly, and we've tried this legislative session to get the legislature to use the same public disclosure requirements that they impose on the executive branch, properly so, that they disclose, what the money is they have and what it's being spent on. And we don't know how much money they have set aside from previous appropriations in these funds in the House and Senate, and we urge that if they're going to give themselves the ability to carry that money forward from one biennium to the next and the next, that they give that same prerogative to state agencies, which they refuse to do. So they can disclose what that money is used for, and if they make that complete public disclosure, and then I might modify my characterization of it. But for now, when they're keeping it hidden, the amount of it and the purpose of it hidden from everyone, then I stand by what I said.
Speaker Dowd said yesterday it's about $7 million in the House. Senator Gazelka either wasn't sure off the top of his head or declined to answer, but Speaker Dowd was fairly open about it. $7 million, he thought they could operate maybe for a month or two. Is that the first time you've heard that figure?
First time I heard it from him. First time I heard it from an authoritative source. I've heard various rumors amounts exceeding that. So, I mean, it's been pure conjecture because it's the first time I've heard the Speaker state definitively what the amount is, and Senator Gazelka, if that's accurate too. I mean, that's one small step in a better direction for them to at least disclose how much money they're sitting on and carrying forward.
Okay, thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Dan. I'm going to have to go in about 2 minutes here. I'm going to Duluth for a press conference up there, but let me take one more question, Kristen.
Okay, your final question comes from the line of David Montgomery with Pioneer Press. Your line is now open.
Hello, Governor.
David?
There's been some discussion of whether or not your line item vetoes of the legislature is constitutional. There were also some questions raised about whether the clause that you talked about that you felt bound by in the state government bill, binding the state government and the tax bill together, did you ever have any debate about whether that was constitutional and whether instead of being bound by that you could file a lawsuit and get a court to strike that down?
We thought about that, but I mean, first of all, it would put everything. The security of 1,300 employees in jeopardy. MMB would have to, on June 1st, give layoff notices to everybody. The matter, if we took it to court, I don't know how quickly the court would resolve it. Last time in 2011, some of the employees of the Department of Revenue were considered to be essential and were kept on by the magistrate. Others were not and were laid off involuntarily. So, I mean, it would have, thrown the whole matter in flux and then have it required to go to the court to be adjudicated. Meanwhile, I don't know how we can function as state government efficiently without a Department of Revenue, which I guess that occurred to the legislature is the reason that they chose that tactic.
Thank you, Governor.
All right, thank you. Thank you all. To be continued. Thank you, Krista.
And this concludes today's conference call. You may now disconnect.